Russian President Dmitry Medvedev is in China for strategic talks. Interestingly, Russia and China all year have had a number of areas where they've coordinated, but on energy in particular, we're seeing a lot of movement. Russia and China have always had an ambivalent relationship strategically. There was a famous Sino-Soviet alliance in the 1950s, but it didn't last very long and was quickly replaced with distrust and an enormous amount of paranoia, especially on the Chinese side. Most recently, the two have aligned on topics like Iran, where they both passed United Nations sanctions in cooperation with the United States, and on North Korea, where both states were reluctant to blame North Korea for sinking the South Korean ship, the Chonan. We've also seen progress in the energy realm, where China and Russia have managed to agree on things that they've been negotiating for a long time without much success. In particular, Russia is going to start sending oil exports to China much more regularly, with the completion of the construction of the Eastern Siberia Pacific Ocean pipeline in Russia's Far East down into Daqing, China. And that's going to be about 3% of China's daily oil consumption, so it's a significant amount. It makes sense that the two would progress on energy issues. Russia receives large trade surpluses from exporting energy primarily to Europe, and it's interested in developing the Far East and Siberia so that it can service Asian demand, which is rapidly growing. And at the same time, China needs to find ways to import energy that don't necessarily depend on maritime routes that can be obstructed, either by wars in the Middle East or in some kind of dire situation by the United States Navy, which could theoretically embargo China. China, therefore, has been pursuing land routes to get its energy. Well, one of the primary concerns is for China, once it becomes dependent on Russian energy supplies, it also becomes vulnerable to Russian political manipulation of those energy supplies. In particular, Russia has shown in Europe that it's willing to use energy as a lever against states that don't agree with it or that are willing to conflict with its resurgence into its former Soviet sphere of influence. And for China, of course, that's not so much of a problem, and yet there's the lingering suspicion that if China becomes more dependent on Russia, that Russia could one day have reason to wield those energy supplies in a coercive manner against China. Even while we're seeing these two progress in their cooperation on strategic issues, the elements of distrust in the relationship persist. We're seeing them compete in Central Asia. We're seeing Russia bulk up its naval influence in the Pacific. And we're also seeing, the ways in which their general geopolitical alignments don't match, such as China's increasing tensions with India and Russia's overall good relationship with India. And so there are a number of areas where the two will continue to collide in the future. And what that means is that even though they're getting along well now and making progress in their energy relationship, we aren't necessarily seeing a Russian-Chinese alliance take shape.